Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there and welcome back. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com. You are at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, and today I have a special guest. His name is Kosi Stobbs. Hey, Kosi, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, brother?
Good. I'm glad to have you here. And before we get going, I want to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of your background so they can get to know you before we dive into the interview. Awesome. So Kosi is the CEO of Specific Mechanical Systems and the Director of Property Owl Investment Solutions. As a teenager, he worked at Burger King to support himself for college. He graduated at the age of 22, where he also bought his first property. He dreamt of helping and inspiring others, troubled youth, to find another way, and now is the owner of over 10 properties by the age of 30. Now he owns a market cap of over 50 million in business and in real estate and has over 100 employees. Wow, how amazing is that?
It's been a pretty wild ride, to say the least.
Yeah, it definitely, and I want to be able to dive into that. I want to know more about your background. Where are you originally from? And if you can go back to that, because I think that's where your journey really started for you.
Yeah, I'll start with my parents. My parents, first my mom. My mom immigrated to Canada first. She used to make clothes in Jamaica in a factory, and she applied to become a nanny in Canada. And she applied through this lottery system and got accepted. So she came through this lottery system to become a nanny in Canada, and then shortly thereafter, she moved my father out, and then very shortly thereafter they had us as kids. And so I'm first generation. I was born in Canada, and it's 100% a lottery system as to why that I was born here and not born in Jamaica. And if I look at where we were at in Jamaica, my mom, she worked in a factory, and my dad in similar situations. So grew up on a farm. So neither of them had any money to their name. In fact, when they came to Canada, it was with $100. It was the only thing that they had to their names, and hope for the future. So I think what they instilled in me was this concept of like, look, we're here literally on a lottery. You made it to this country, and you really need to take advantage of every opportunity that comes to you and in front of you. So that's kind of been my mindset as a child, of hearing that over and over again, saying, hey, we're in this situation literally as through a lottery that we're able to be in the situation that we're in, right? So that's some of the learnings that I had as a child growing up. And I've always been ambitious ever since I could remember. That part, I don't know where I took that from. The part of like, I just want to do more, accomplish more, be more. And I remember at the age of 15, saying to myself that I wanted to own 10 properties by the time I was 30, right? And that was kind of my goal that I had. And at the time I was working at Burger King, and people really looked at me like I had some type of chemical imbalance in my head, because I'm literally, my parents are poor, I'm poor. Why are you talking about owning that much? And you work at Burger King as a cook, right? So but I believed in myself, and I really studied a lot. I studied a lot of people that were successful and what they had accomplished and how they accomplished it, and I really set out a plan that if I wanted to own a property, if I wanted to own multiple, I'd start with one. For me to own one, I mean I had to save a certain amount. So I started saving $100 a month while I was working at Burger King.
Wow.
And that incrementally got larger and larger and larger. And then when I graduated, I took an engineering degree. When I graduated from engineering, not only had I paid for my tuition, I also worked more in the summertime. So not only had I paid my tuition, I also had $8,000.
Wow.
I used that $8,000 as a first-time home buyer's down payment, and was able to buy a property that was worth $138,000 at the time. I've used that with the $8,000, and then part of it was timing. A few years later, that property went from $130,000 to $250,000, and I was able to access money out of that property to buy additional ones, and then it kind of the snowball effect, I like to call it, as things start to grow.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I'm curious to know is, like, again, you came from a very humble home, and as you said, your parents came here with $100. Obviously, you even being first generation Canadian, there was something instilled in you, that something you were thinking about, that said, I cannot allow the limitations of the background that my parents came from, or even the social circumstances, to really overtake the opportunity of me becoming the person that I want to be, right? And so with that said, because you definitely didn't allow that, besides, like there has to be something where you said, you know what, I don't want this. And obviously you will see your parents, making that sacrifice, taking their leap of faith to give you the ability to create that. Although I've seen it too, where a lot of times parents that migrate from other countries to the United States or even Canada, that the kids don't take advantage of that, and they just happen to fall into bad habits or bad associations that doesn't allow them to really become the true potential that they are. For you, though, you didn't allow that. So what was that driving factor that really said, I am something better than what my current circumstance is or my background?
Yeah, there was two parts to that. Is my parents always told me I could be whatever I wanted to be. So that's part one, right? Is my parents looking at me and say, Kosi, you can be whatever you want to be, and then me actually believing that I can be whatever I wanted to be. That was part of it. Another part of it was, there's two things. I said, I'm blessed that I was born poor, because it taught me budgeting, right? It taught me how to budget. And then as I grew in life and bought businesses and bought real estate, I could leverage off that to be able to budget. So that was a blessing for me. So I think I was born with everything handed. I wouldn't have needed to budget and save to buy little things as I was growing up. So that was a blessing. The second blessing was I've got dyslexia. And why that was a blessing was when I was in grade school, we had to do a speech for class. And because I had dyslexia, I was so uncomfortable about doing that speech, because I would stammer when I read. Like, you remember when you sit in class and the teacher has everyone go around the room and read a sentence?
Yep.
That's a very troubling experience for me. So I said, I can't get up there and read a speech like other people can. I'll fumble on my words. So what I did was I studied. The first speech I had to do, I studied for like 50 hours for the thing.
Wow.
And it was because I wanted to be perfect that I didn't have to read this 5-minute speech to my classmates. And up until that point, everyone thought I was an idiot in school because my grades weren't great. I think a lot of it had to do with just my learning disability that I had. But I studied so much for that speech, and I saw the progression of, and this is grade school, so I saw the progression of really shitty to, okay, I can kind of read the words and get through it, to it's sounding really, really good, to the point where I started speaking in front of the class, and I could see the energy from the classmates around me. And came out with a different type of swagger. I started moving. I started walking down the aisles, doing my speech, and everyone saying how great of a speaker I am. Kosi, you're an amazing speaker. you should do this, you should do that, and this is the future. Like, wow, he's such a great speaker. All these accolades I was getting. But more than the accolades, it was the link between outworking everybody else and success. I was able to connect that link at a very young age. So when I got that, I'm like, wow, if I can just work harder than the rest of them, I'll do better. And that carried me through school. Like when I was in grade 3, my average was under 40% school. And I slowly went from 40s to 50s, 50s to 60s, and I graduated at 78.5%. And the 0.5 is important because that's the mark that I needed to get into engineering. So I got into engineering by 0.5%. But I got there by being the hardest working student in my class, because I knew that in order for me to succeed with the upbringing that I had, if I did what everybody else did, I wouldn't achieve great results. I had to work a lot harder than whatever. So when people are putting in 1, I got to put in 2, right? So when I got into engineering, it was the same thing. Like the professor comes out one of the first days, he said, hey, you guys welcome to engineering. 1/3 of you fail out the first year, 1/3 of you fail out the second year. And if you came in, barely get in, you have a high likelihood of failing out. So I'm like, that doesn't matter to me because I know I outworked everybody else. And I literally outworked everybody for 4 years.
Wow.
Got up first in the morning, started studying, and I went to bed, I just boom. And then in the summer times, I worked full time to save money to pay for my tuition. And that was my cycle.
Yeah.
And it also saved much additional for the real estate I wanted to buy. There was a lot of small sacrifices. Like I couldn't afford Burger King. Like I couldn't afford the food at the places I was working at. I couldn't afford to buy it. I had to eat at home. All these little things. When I was at school, I couldn't afford the meals at school. I wasn't going out. You know what I mean? Like those little things that allow you to save money. I was doing those things. So it's a culmination of all those things that said, okay, like it was the early success of between hard work and accomplishment. And that success early on led me to the animal that I am today.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like it was like that was it.
No,
if I didn't have dyslexia, I would have not seen that link, and I probably wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, no, and I love that the things you mentioned, right? I mean, you definitely are a true inspiration and an example of you can overcome anything because you've done that. You know, being coming from an immigrant family, you know, and having that background, you know, those roots from Jamaica over to Canada, and then you just being determined, you know, having the determination. And one thing that I tell people, and you kind of mentioned that is that a need or a want, right? And you were kind of differentiating that in terms of what is a need and what is a want. If I need this, you have to get it. I mean, there's no other way around it. If it's a want, I can live without it. Except now, the thing that I see is a lot of people, they focus more on the wants. I want to go out and eat when I can stay home and save money.
Absolutely.
I want to go out and get the latest phone because my phone is a year old or 2 years old, right? And so that want starts taking over the opportunity that you potentially have. And you obviously said, no, I'm going to put all of those wants to the side and focus on what I need to do to make it happen, which is amazing to see that. I mean, one thing that I'm very amazed by is, you know, from flipping burgers to now a multimillionaire with an excess of 50 million in assets. Like, that's amazing. So what goes on to your mind knowing that you were able to accomplish that at such an early age?
What goes to my mind is I don't even really keep track so much anymore as I'm looking to the next opportunity and where we can take it next, right? And by the next, I mean taking my existing businesses and helping them grow. Right. And then also acquiring additional businesses, right. And acquiring additional real estate. So I'm always forward focused. I've got a vision of where I want to go to. And it's just every day taking incremental steps to reach that goal and that vision. And if something is outside of that, I just don't do it. It's very simple for me. There's a lot of things that I say no to in my day. I say no to a lot of things. And then and that's great. That's good. Because it keeps you kind of structured in the path you want to go. And that thing that differentiating between needs and wants, I think it's so important that you brought that up. I read a lot. One of the books that I read early on was The Richest Man in Babylon. And one of the key things I took from that, there's so many different tidbits. One of the key things I took from that was there's a part where the richest man in Babylon is explaining to other people that, you all make a different amount of money, but yet none of you have any money at the end of the month, right? Whether it's $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month, you all make a different amount of money and none of you have any money saved over. The reason why is human nature is we want more than we have, right? So example, when you're catching the bus, you want a car. When you're driving a car, you want a nicer car. When you're driving a nicer car, you want a more expensive car, right? And when you have a car, you want a jet. When you've got the jet, you want a yacht. You want a helicopter to drop off on the yacht. And so it's very easy. It doesn't matter if you make $1,000 a month or $100,000 a month. And people don't recognize that, but it's easy to burn all of that through all that money. And it's not until you recognize that you'll always have more wants than what you have today. That'll always exceed. And until you say, no, I'm going to work within these limits, I'm going to work with this budget, you'll always, forever be broke.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you make $100,000 a year or $1 million a year or $10 million a year, until you figure out that piece, you'll always be broke because you won't have any money at the end of the year. You actually owe more than you have. Because trust me, like, there's so many cool things that you can do that if you're not focused, it can really get out of control.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned too is one thing that I see in you is that focused mind, right? So have you? I know you read a lot. I was checking out some of your posts where you've read so many different books, and you were kind of telling your followers things they can read. Some of the things that you definitely recommend. Besides reading, which I know you read a lot, what are some of the other things that you do to keep you going and having that positive mindset? It seems like you've studied a lot of wealthy people too. And so you've created some habits that have put you in this state of mind. Can you give us more of that?
Yeah. So habits, for me, it starts with a long-term vision of where you want to be, right? So long-term means 20 years. What do you want in 20 years? What does that look like for you? If you can't get to 20 years, what does 5 years look like to you? What is the most admirable things that you can have, both professionally, personally, economically, health? What is your ideal life and 5 years from now? And then I create a vision board. I've got a vision board that has my vision of where I want to be and all those key attributes, right? So that starts on 20 years. A 20-year stretch goal could be, I want to be a billionaire, right? And that is my goal, right? So I want to be a billionaire. And then I get down to a 5-year plan and I do a vision board for that. I've got a vision board for a 20-year plan. Do a vision board for a 5-year plan. This is what success looks like for me over 5 years. I get really, really clear with it. And then I start to say, what are the things that can help me achieve that thing? And I start to go into that path. What are the things? And I start to cycle through a bunch of different options. And that's part of the reading, is reading people's stories and saying, okay, they did it this way, they did it that way. And part of the way was figuring out what will work for me, what won't work for me. So I'll give you a really specific example. I want to be a billionaire. There's only a certain amount of ways that you can become a billionaire. There's not a lot of it. There's not that many of them. So I've got to research billionaires and figure out how they did it. And then I've got to think, what of those things can I do and what of those things can I not do, right? So I'm not going to be the guy that's going to come up with a brand new system widget. I won't design Uber. I won't design a new Facebook or a new Instagram. So all those examples, they're off the table for me. What I can do is some of the ones that got there via investment strategies, whether that's real estate or businesses, I can follow that path. So then I do a deeper dive into those areas and say, what is it that they actually did? And then as I do that deeper dive, I see the commonalities, and then I frame what I'm going to do around that, right? So it's a process, and that's where, that's the engineering brain, where it's a process. And you don't have to have this brain to go through it, but it's a process of what do you want? Who's done it before? How do I emulate what they've done? And then working towards that day by day and building a plan around that, using what's new in society. So certain things in society that are different today, that actually help us get there quicker, right? Things like this, things like a podcast, things like Instagram, things like Facebook, they allow us to get our results actually faster than what previous generations did if you use them effectively. So it's utilizing today's technology with that mindset to understand, okay, how am I actually going to accomplish this? How has it been accomplished? Like if you look at Warren Buffett, and he is my idol, right? But if you look at Warren Buffett, you know, Warren Buffett went and studied from Benjamin Graham, right? So Warren Buffett, when he was young in his early 20s, he went to a school halfway across the country so that he can learn from someone who had achieved what he wanted to achieve. So he spent his time learning and studying for that. He never asked, the question, how much money am I going to make? How much blah, blah, blah. Because he recognized that it's the education and him teaching him to be a good investor, it would work more wonders than any other job could, right? So he was getting that lesson and then learning from him. And another thing that he attributes to is his communication ability. He took a course from Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie is a well-renowned back in the early 90s of teaching people on, personal development and speech and communication. So he said those two things, Benjamin Graham and Dale Carnegie's course on communication, is what took him from that millionaire status to get past the billionaire. And he knew he was going to get there early because he had a plan. It wasn't because his IQ was that much better than anybody else's, and neither is mine. I sound smarter to some people because I read a lot and I can remember and I can piece things together. But if anybody else had read as much as I read, or had gone on Warren Buffett's path and done what he done, maybe they don't get $80 billion, but they might get one, right? They might get 500 million. And I'm not exaggerating those numbers. I mean, numbers sound massive and they sound huge, but you got to remember when Warren Buffett was 15, he went to the library and read every single business book that there was in the library as a child. He's gone through every stock in the NASDAQ. He went through every stock on the NASDAQ and evaluated every single one. If you do those things, you will learn what makes a good business and what makes a bad business. You evaluate them over 10 years. Like it's an outcome that will happen. But the reality is if I tell 1,000 people to do that, I'd be lucky if I find one that is actually going to do it. If I find 10,000 people to do it, even 100,000 people to do it, it's unlikely to find one or two that'll do it. And you know what? Those one or two that do it, they end up being successful.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I know a lot of the people that are very wealthy. They do. I think I forget if it's an average of 1 or 2 books per week that they read. Or the average CEO is reading 52 books a year or something to that extent, right? So I know that there's a lot of wealth and knowledge doing those things. And so I definitely I agree with that. What would be one thing you can tell people? Because I know sometimes people say, well, 5 years so far from now, even let alone 20 years, or even let alone next year, especially as the recorder of this podcast, with everything going on, with the madness of what's going on, people focus so much on the negative. They're like, I cannot even think 1 month ahead. And so how do you tell people to start shifting that mindset and forget about that crap and say, no, there is definitely a possibility, and there is definitely something that you can do where you can create a game plan for 5 years from now and stay focused on that game plan? Because some people cannot see it that far down the line.
Yeah, I think it's okay to accept your current situation. And the current situation could be shit for you, but it's okay to accept that current situation. But don't do that for 24 hours of the day.
Right.
You got 24 hours in a day, and say you're going to use 8 for sleep. That's 16 hours left. But you got 16 hours in a day. You can have a pity party for an hour, 2 hours, right? But at some point, you need to say, what is it that's going to help me personally and my future? And the reason why I think so far talk about the future is because there was a point in time, I'm being honest with you, Cesar, there was a point in time where that's all that I had, right? The current was so bad that all that I had was the potential of the future, right? And sometimes that's all you have is a hope that it has to get better, that this can't be the end result. Because if this is the end result, I can't deal with the end result for year after year. right? And when you get to that point, that's where you got to focus on the future. And you got to say that it's possible. You have to believe it's possible. And then you have to take the steps to achieve it. But it is possible. And when you hit those low points, those extra low points, that's when you need that 5-year plan. That's when you need to look at that and be like, you know what? I'm going through the shit and it's really hard. But if I can get through it, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I love that. And I was reading something you mentioned, and it comes very perfect. You said you said this 10 years ago. Sure, times are tough, but we make them tougher by not believing in ourselves. And you wrote that 10 years ago, right? And,
yes.
and so I was looking at that. I want you to elaborate on that, because then you actually put a different comment saying, now reading this now, didn't know what that was going to do, what kind of impact it was going to do for myself now. But you wrote that 10 years ago, right? So talk about that. Let me know more about that.
Okay, I'm going to get you in my mindset at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2006, my brother was killed, right? And my older brother, and he meant so much to me and was so impactful in my life. And, you know, but he got involved in wrong things, and it ended up costing him his life, right? And going through that, and then fast forward a few years later, we have the global financial crisis, right? And going through that, it was just like you get into a really, really dark place. And again, and that's when I built out that vision board, right? That is around that time where I just started looking, I'm like, you know what? All this stuff, like, is like, you know, life's not fair. It's not fair. Like, why him? Why us? Why a bunch of things? And then building that out and saying, you know what? Life is tough, but we make them tougher when we don't believe in ourselves. And I just said, I got to believe in myself. I got to believe that the goals that I set in place, that I can actually accomplish them if I just stick with the plan and I kind of can keep going forward. Because all these other people that I referenced that had done it before, they all went through downturns. A lot of them dealt with personal sacrifice. A lot of people listening to this are dealing with personal sacrifice. Like we as human beings, we see the bare surface of someone's life, even when we interact with them. And we don't know the pain that people are going through. And I'm telling you right now, everybody has pain, and it's deep. And the more they smile, sometimes the bigger that pain is. And they're smiling to keep you from feeling that pain. And like, it's accepting that and saying, what can we do for ourselves to make a better future? And it's going through all those traumatic experiences. And that's why I like you saying, man, you can overcome anything. And it's so true. You can overcome anything. And the worse that thing is, the bigger a person it can make you. Yeah. Right? Because that pain, if you can bottle that up, call it energy. If you can bottle up that energy and you can use that in a positive direction, that energy is massive, right? And like that same energy that's got you thinking suicidal thoughts, for those people that are thinking suicidal thoughts, that same energy in this direction can make you millions.
Yeah.
That line is so like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And
here's a great example that people can understand. Kanye West, right? Kanye West had a real big problem. And he dealt with the death of his mother. He was in a very low place emotionally. When they first came out, he was one of the first people to be canceled by cancel culture. He was $50 million in debt, right? Trying to start his vision, his goal of owning a shoe, clothing, and being a clothing icon. He's gone from that in a 5-year period. He's now a billionaire worth $1.3 billion. Wow. Yeah. Right? So that pain that almost took him to that very, very dark place that had him there, that energy put in the right direction made him a billionaire. And that's something that they saw that. A lot of people saw that event and saw how it transpired because his life is so public. But even in your life, in private, and the pain that you feel in private, you can turn that around if we just direct it in the right direction and say, no, it happened, it's horrible, and I pray that it doesn't happen to anybody else. Yeah. but I hope that we can take that and use it as fuel to do something better.
Yeah, and then that's one thing that I've learned too is that a lot of times, and again, it is very unfortunate, right, to go through a family loss, or you lose a family member, or you're going through some financial hardship, or whatever the case may be. And I know that's very difficult going through that. I have gone through some of those myself too, and it's hard. Yet I also learned how, talking to people like you, have been able to take that pain and turn, like you said, shift that energy, change the framing of that, and really redirect that to a more of a positive state of mind. It's not an easy thing to do, yet it's inevitable. We have to do it to be able to continue to push forward and continue to move forward. And I know that a lot of times people might say, well, it might be easy for you to say, you haven't been through that. Again, I go back to the same thing. People, sir, there's many cases that people have gone through very difficult times, and when you start looking at their life, or start looking at what went on through their past experiences, you can see, like, wow, they actually have gone through more difficult and challenging times than I have. And if they were able to do it, I can do it, right? And so there's really no excuse, in my opinion, if you set your mind to it and you're persistent and you continue to push forward, right? And you said, you know what, I need to do this. I love what you said too, is that not accepting and saying, is this all there is? Like, like you said, there was no past. All you had was your future. And if you were to accept that, what could that do to you or to your mind, your mental state of being, right? So rather than losing yourself into that, you decided to say, no, I have a future. I'm going to look at my 20-year plan. I'm going to look at my 5-year plan. I'm going to be able to take that and create something big, which I really, really enjoyed and love that about you. If you were to, ask or define, what is success to you? How do you define success?
That's a really good question. And to me, it's being happy in what I do and being fulfilled. And it really is my vision board. That's success. And I'm living it out. Like, this to me is success. I haven't even put a number to it, but this to me is success. Being on this podcast, it says two things. It says, number one, I've accomplished something that somebody wants to talk about. Mm-hmm. And number two, I'm having the opportunity to share this story, and maybe someone hears it and they get inspired in a different sort of way, and maybe they change their life. And part of my vision on my vision board is to inspire millions of people. And I've had that on my vision board going back over 10 years, is to inspire millions of people. And I never knew how I was going to do that, in what framework that would take, but I knew that I wanted to do that. So remember I said I select what I do and what I don't do? Mm-hmm. Because this fits in my vision, that's why I'm on this podcast today, right? And because, you know what I mean? That we can overcome anything that fits within my morals and my standings of like what I'm trying to accomplish. So it all lines up together, right? Yeah. And me being able to share my vision about this. Like, if we were going to come in here and talk about baking, I wouldn't be on here, right?
Right, yeah.
It doesn't fit with what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So that's the key to it, right? It's really getting laser focused. And, one thing I love to tell people all the time is, you'd be surprised what persistence can accomplish for you.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I've accomplished, the biggest things I've accomplished, were at the end of me looking at it and thinking, I don't think this is possible, and then taking 10 more steps and realizing that it was achievable. And a lot of that is just being tested, right? You get tested to see how bad you really want it.
Yeah.
So that's why the vision's so important. It's got to be bigger. I talked about the death of my brother, right? Mm-hmm. When my brother died, he was a huge inspiration for me, and he went on my vision board. It's the most important part of my vision board. It's, I want to build a charity in his name that can impact billions. Now, when you're taking something that was the most traumatic part of my life because of how impactful he was to me, when taking something like that and turning it into something that's so horrible and turning it into something that could be so beautiful, that's when I don't feel like waking up at 4:30 when I get my ass out of bed. Because it's so much bigger than Kosi, right? It's my brother. It's helping billions. It's so much bigger than me that I'm just the vehicle that's doing it, right? And things are happening. I'm the vehicle, but it's so much bigger than me of what I need to accomplish. And when your goals are that big, and your why is that big, it's hard to not accomplish anything. It's very hard. It's hard to not do it when your goals are that big, when you're that driven, when it's so it's not just me. I feel like I'm carrying, there's so many people that I'm supporting with what I do, that I'm impacting, that's why I need to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when you get to that point of where not having success is not an option.
Right. Yeah, there's three things that I want to reinforce that you mentioned, and I love that. Number one, Zig Ziglar talked about this, and he said, if you give enough people what they want, you will get what you want, which is what you're doing. You're trying to impact, thousands of millions of people by being there, being a servant, serving people, helping people out, giving them inspiration, giving them ideas, which is awesome. The other thing you talked about is success is not, and I forget who talked about this too. Maybe it was Errol Nightingale. I'm not sure, to be honest. I forget.
Mm-hmm.
Is not defined by the numbers that you have on the bank account, because you see it time after time. People that are very wealthy are not happy. They're not fulfilled, and they end up in some of them have even taken their lives, right? And so I believe that success, as you mentioned, is being happy and being fulfilled and having that sense of accomplishment. Not necessarily a dollar figure, although the dollar is great. That's not the driving force. The other one is, what is your purpose? What is your, some people say your why? What is the thing that is pushing you forward? And in this case, as you're trying to create this, one of those things is your brother, right? And so when you have, I think, those three things that you just talked about, and you take that as part of a combination, there's really nothing stopping you. There's no obstacles, because you're very focused and driven on the things you want to do and the things you want to accomplish. And I think that the more we do of that, the better we can get at some of those things in our lives, right? Now,
and I also like to connect it for people with real life examples. So that's the bigger picture stuff of like build a big why. Real life examples come to, I'm in the process. For example, I try to buy a property or trying to buy property, and I go to a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker says, "Well, this doesn't work. You can't buy this because of this, this, and this." So then I go to another one. And I go to another one. And I go to another one. And I go to another one. I just keep going. And then I find a lender that says, "Okay, yeah, no, I see what you see in this deal, and we can finance that." And it's like not stopping at like the first no or the 10th no or the 20th no. And then that's where that translates to real life examples. And that's where I talked about, like when you're going through it, it's tough. Like some of the levels of rejection that you get, it's like, wow, especially in the beginning, the level of rejection you get is huge. And it's rejection from people that are very competent in the field. It's rejection from somebody who's done it for 30 years and is looking at you who's starting out and saying, this can't happen because of this, this, and this. And then it's like, okay, I respect the advice, I respect the opinion, but I'm still I respectfully still see the value in what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep asking, keep pushing forward. I put a post on my Instagram one day that said, if you've got a business idea, come talk to me. And if you need some level of microfinancing, I'll look at it. Right. And there's over 100,000 followers that I have. To this date, I haven't had one person pitch me a business idea.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? I have people message me, give me money, which I just say, fly it tight. But I've had nobody come to me and say, hey, I've got a business opportunity that I would like you to evaluate and potentially finance, for, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. Nobody's done that.
Wow.
Now, I know how I am as an individual. And if someone throws that out to me, I'm using the next 7 days, day and night. I'm preparing. I'm saying, hey, this is my opportunity. What do you think? And this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And I'm pitching them hard. Whereas I pitched it out and then I got crickets.
Wow. It's amazing.
Right? And then so many people will say like, oh, I don't have enough money to do this. So I want to do this, but I don't have enough money. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay.
You haven't looked farther. You haven't looked deep down, right? Or you haven't, and sometimes it's funny. I talked about this. I was doing a video a couple of weeks back, and I talked about how sometimes the opportunity is right in front of you. It might be disguised. It might not seem, all nice and pretty with the shiny objects, right? Because that's how we tend to want to get it. Like I want it to be nice and crystal clear, right? Yet the opportunity is right in front of you, like kind of what you did. It's right there. and you got to be able to take it. Otherwise, that opportunity is not leaving. You left the opportunity. The opportunity has always been there. It's just you just ended up putting your focus someplace else, and you neglected to see that opportunity because it's not shiny, right? And I believe what that there are opportunities there, and so you just need to have that right state of mind, and not be so close-minded in terms of that, or even so believing in yourself, believing that even me pitching this to you and say, hey, Kosi, I have an idea. Believing that it might be good or not, it doesn't matter. I believe in my idea and I'm going to give it to you. If you say no, like you said, go on to the next one. But at least I believe in that. And sometimes people say, this is not good enough. He's not going to accept it. You're already thinking on your behalf instead of on my behalf. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
So that's awesome. So if people wanted to, connect with you or follow you, where can they find you?
The best way is it's actually on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. It's The Property Owl. And once a week, Saturday mornings, I do a book review. So every Saturday at 9:30, I do a book review where I take a business book that I've read and I go through it and I talk about it, about how I see it and the key touch points and how it's impacted my life and different components. And then we do a bit of a Q&A. And then I generally post daily, 1 to 3 times a day. And all my posts, I don't post for the sake of posting. Everything that I post has deep meaning to me. And there's a thought behind it, and there's a lesson that I want people to learn. And I believe that while there's not a lot that can change your tomorrow, and that's for all of us, there's not much we can do to change tomorrow, but there's a lot we can do to change 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And a tremendous amount that we can do to change 10 years from now. 10 years from now, you can be a brand new person. I don't care where you're at now. You can literally do anything in 10 years. And in 5 years, it's pretty amazing what we can accomplish as well. So it's a journey, and I want people to join me on that journey and, pay attention every day, listen to what they say, listen to podcasts like yours. You get inspired, and then sometimes everybody's different, and sometimes you just need a little nugget to change your direction and put you in the right path so that you can build it for yourself, because it is you that ultimately has to do all the heavy lifting.
Right.
But
Yeah, definitely. I have 2 more questions for you. You're coming up with a book, right? Can you just touch a little bit on that? Because I know it's not out yet. I don't know if you want to give much or not, but can you talk about your book and inspiration?
Yeah, totally. It's very close to being out. I'll have it out by mid-May.
Awesome.
So, but the book is really simple. It's called Fuck Broke, Let's Get Rich. And it's literally about how I went from zero to where I'm at today, and the mindset and the mentality that you need, and then the steps that you need to take to get out of broke. And a lot of people are in broke, and we're noticing that now more than ever, right? Like both people and companies. A lot of companies are broke. They thought they were making money, but they were broke because they didn't have any money to deal with the downside. So that's the book. And literally, it's taken me a long time. I first talked about writing the book about 10 years ago, and it's better that I've waited, because I was able to put a lot better content in it today than I could have then. And it's taken me over a year to write, and it's basically I poured everything into it. So yeah.
That's awesome. And the last question is, you've given us a lot of great tips and nuggets. If you were to give us one last one on what people can do now, if they're going through a challenging time, that they can overcome anything in their life, what would that be?
Yeah. So what I talked earlier about how communication is so much better today than it was before, and how easy it is to reach out to people. When I look at Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter on their own, even Facebook to a lesser extent, you can literally get in contact with CEOs of these great companies all over the world. And what I would do is take the initiative today, and every day use an hour or 2 to contact 40 people, at minimum 40 people. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm inspired by you. I'm trying to learn, or whatever it is, and just reach out. And it doesn't need to be, you don't even have to have a reason to reach out other than to build a communication. And I need you to make a list of the people you're reaching out to, and write it down, log it, of who you're reaching out to on which days, and then have a method for following up with them at a later date. And take notes from the meeting, right? So there's a bunch of steps. But I want you to take action in building your network. because I hear a lot of people say I don't have a network, and you say you don't have a network because you're lazy, is my opinion. In today's world, to not have a network is lazy.
Yep.
You're not reaching out to people. And if you start reaching out to people, even if a small percentage of them reach back, there's still a lot of people, you're expanding your network.
I love that. I really love that. That's a good way to definitely get more in your network. And you just never know, those people, how they can either empower you or help you out throughout your own journey down the line, right? So I really love that. Kosi, thank you so much for being in the show. I really appreciate our time together and really enjoyed having you here as a guest. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
All right. Being here. Thank you. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure you like, comment, and share this podcast. Check out Kosi. Make sure you follow him on Instagram. And please stay tuned for the next upcoming episodes. Have a good day. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you tuned in to this podcast. You can find me at Spreaker.com, where you can like and subscribe. And to learn more about myself and my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at Facebook under Cesar R. Espino. Once again, thanks for joining me. I am looking forward to having you at the next episode, and know that you truly can overcome anything.